What is negative about consequences?
You know, consequences is actually a complex discussion because there are consequences all the time, right? If I don't I'm feeling cold, and if I don't put my jacket on, the consequence is that I'm going to be cold, right? So there's consequences that we deal with every day. The problematic consequences is consequences that we use to create as punishments. So if you don't do this, you'll have to do this. You know those kind of consequences? What's an example? Give me an example. Yeah.
If you don't clean your room, you're not watching TV.
Exactly. If you don't clean your room, you're not going to watch TV. If you don't
finish your broccoli, you can't have dessert.
If you don't finish your broccoli, you can't have dessert. You know, my word for these sort of consequences is they're mean. You know, they're mean. They don't have any connection to deepening the connection with the child. Child doesn't want to clean their room. There's no curiosity in that. There's no inquiry about what might be going on. It just becomes a consequence. If you don't, this is happening. So I'm always looking for ways to deepen the parent-child dialogue, not turn it into something superfluous and dismissing. So to me, the richer discussion is, what's going on? Not wanting to clean your room. Is that a demand I'm making of you, but that's not one that you're feeling is right for you? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we could do here. And in our philosophy, we talk a lot about core basic human needs. So what's the parent's need to have the room cleaned? A need for order, a clean need for cleanliness, whatever. And what's the need of the child? To have autonomy, to make decisions for themselves. This is a much richer place of connection than it is of just giving consequences. And I believe that consequences is a knee-jerk reaction we get from the dominant parent. If you don't do this, I'm going to make you do that. Bypasses the prefrontal cortex, so bypasses thinking, bypasses, it just goes to my reactive place in my brain. You want to add?
I think what you're just talking about takes much more bandwidth. It takes much more time, right? Right. So I'm imagining my granddaughters, because now I have to go home and inform my son and daughter-in-law that when they say no dessert until you finish your broccoli, that actually that's violent parenting. This is going to be a shock.
Well, I would do it a little differently.
Okay. How'd you do it?
I wouldn't go home and say that's violent parenting. I think you'll lose them right there. I would say, I went to this conference today, and I've had an opportunity to reflect. And I'm thinking about. I think you'll probably get further.
Good, thank you. This could be a little demonstration, right?
I love this duo.
That's actually
So there's one question here that actually I think we're going to have addressed by one of our workshops. I think this is a Betty Lamont question. Where's Betty? Is she here?
No, she left.
Oh, she left? Oh, okay. I think she's on tomorrow. Right, so she's on tomorrow. And the question was that we had spoken about the 0 to 3 brain development and how vital areas are formed. And then what do you do with a 7-year-old that has developed more, and can you assist in relearning or fixing the brain? Well, I encourage anyone who's interested in that neurological reorganization to go to Betty Lamont's workshop tomorrow, because that's her specialist subject. So that's that question done. And then there are a couple of questions here that really, I don't know if either of our speakers feel qualified to address, but it's obviously, it's a very big subject and is very meaningful. I'll read them both out. One says, what are the implications or trauma-informed perspective on generations of cultural trauma, i.e. slavery, discrimination, stealing of indigenous language, and religious beliefs. So there's that, and that kind of dovetails with, oh my goodness, so many questions. That there is a missing from the discussion is the broader social context, such as capitalism, sexism, racism. I don't think we probably have enough time to deal with all of that.
I'll take that one on.
Okay.
I mean, I actually think this is, parenting it's not, as I said, it's not about parenting, it's about social justice. And children are the biggest silent minority in the world. And I love reading the stuff that's come out of South Africa, where children have actually been empowered, and some of the books that have written for children about social justice are incredibly inspiring. So I think that absolutely, we don't like this word, but this is the deepest of political work. When we move off defining politics as what's demonstrated out of Washington, Republicans and Democrats, that's just not what I'm talking about. But looking at the deep fabrics of social justice in the world, looking at where injustices happen, I think that's a profound question about culture. And as we do the reflective work on our own personal narratives that we have to do to understand our triggers and to get the information about our lives, there's also our cultural narrative, isn't there? There's our cultural narrative, there's our class narrative, there's our gender narrative, there's our sexual preference. No, that's not sexual preference. Sexual orientation, excuse me, preference? No. Sexual orientation, there's able-bodyism. I mean, there's so many lenses that we have to really understand our narrative in a very deep way. The other thing I want to say about culture is this journey of owning our cultural background. There's no culture that's made of rock. It's an evolving, belief system that's forever changing, isn't it? And so, yes, we come up against that push of resistance, my cultural background, da-da-da-da-da. And yes, I saw that 12 Years a Slave. And I'm so glad I saw that, as painful as it was. It was so important for me as a New Zealander who didn't grow up here, who doesn't know the history, to actually be exposed. And because what I can understand is the cultural frame a little more, albeit from a movie, much better from people themselves. But in understanding that, I grow as a practitioner. I grow in looking at where because what happened to our ancestors, epigenesis tells us now that that's also coded in our brain and our DNA. So knowing and honoring our ancestors, knowing and honoring the terrible traumas that many of our peoples are going through, and just today, think about those children in Palestine, think about the Israeli children, think about the Ukrainian children, the Iraqi children. We can sum it up about war, but it's lost generations. It's lost generations that are going to have to do immense healing when wars are done to actually heal. So I think this is a profound question.
Well, Ruth is the passion. I'll be the science for a moment. Just to make it worse, Ruth, we have research that really does show that a reality to this idea of multi-generational legacy. So we have research that attests that the traumatic experiences of the older generation affect the next generation regardless of whether the next generation suffers trauma as well. So the multi-generational legacy of the diaspora, of slavery, these are real. These are for real. And so I think part of it is that we're trying to change people who are already hardwired to feel threatened, right? And so that's so much a part of the challenge, is how do we help people who feel threatened to take power? How do we get people who feel threatened to yield power to a better way?
To be reflective.
Exactly, right. There was someone, I think it might have been Dan Siegel, whose theory was that George W. Bush won his second election because he stimulated the amygdalas of the American people. He scared them, right? Right? Right.
So I have divided up some of the questions that were obviously for Ruth and obviously for Janina, and I'm asking you if you both have a little look and see which ones you'd like to respond to. While we're doing that, there's a couple that I can address. There's two here that really came up around Diana's story and Janine's story about LAUSD and what can we do to change schools and help the schools understand the children's experience. And I don't know if Mary Lou is still here from the endowment. Is she here? No, she was here a little bit earlier. And you'll be happy to know that this is an area that the endowment is embracing, that they're really looking at education and trauma, and there's going to be a whole focus on that, and that's why Mary Lou was at this conference. So it's good to know that that's happening. And then there's another question here about ACEs, and Gabriella Grant is going to be talking tomorrow, and she will be touching on ACEs, I imagine. No? No? Yes? I can. Okay. She usually does. And I thought that might be a better question for you to answer. What was the question? I think I will get on with these two because it's a long question. Did you find one that you want to address?
There's one here about how do we fight our own dominant parenting paradigm upbringing. When those powerful feelings come up in us, what do we do? How do we get our partners on board? And what are the alternatives to consequences? So first I want to say, and somebody else asked about timeout. So first I want to say, if you haven't experienced one of ECHO's nonviolent parenting or professional trainings, I would really encourage you to do that, because these are the sort of practical questions we talk about. And actually Stephanie a little later is going to announce a training coming up for mental health professionals where we actually discuss some of these things. And where's Eileen? Eileen tomorrow is going to be doing a workshop on legacy. Yes? Legacy and how to be with your child. And there's, the most profound work you'll ever do as a parent is actually not in relationship with your child directly, but it's in your reflective processes of really understanding your upbringing, breaking through is, not Angela Davis, oh gosh, I'm getting my, what's her name? Miller. What's her name? Alice Miller. As Alice Miller says, one of the most scary and most profound things any human being can do is to reflect on the way we were brought up. We're told not to do that, we have to honor and respect, and it's not okay to say that your parents' love wasn't good enough. And yet that journey into our own narrative is what liberates us to be able to know our triggers and to see our children for who they are. So that's work. That's reflective work. And I think that's what most parenting programs actually leave out. ECHO includes it. I wish I could figure This question, how to get partners on board. I could make such money if I could figure this out. Everywhere I go, this is the question. How, and many of us and many of the people we talk to are actually bi-paradigm households. And, that's a big question, but I will say, if you live in a bi-paradigm household, do not push it under and keep it a secret. Declare it to your children so children can actually not be in the crossfire, but they can develop their own narrative about what happens. It's not disrespectful. It's actually, I think, much more respectful. Mommy does this, Daddy does this. How does that feel? How does that feel? I can imagine this might be confusing for you. And I have seen the most hopeless case of parent resistance come around. I've seen people drag their partners into the parenting classes. Don't think I'm going to say anything here. And I know there are people in the room who could attest that change happens. So don't ever give up. But don't go for the aorta either. Do it gently.
Yes, may I just say, your social engagement system would make it hard not to crack. Even I said I'd come, but I didn't say I'd talk.
I just
a secret weapon, Ruth.
You don't have to say anything. But I congratulate that you're here. Getting in the door is the first thing. Don't have to say anything. One other question here about timeout. I just want to say, learning the roots of timeout, it was never intended as a punishment mode. It was really a regulation strategy, and still is. One of my granddaughters, she absolutely takes her book when she's upset, and she slams the door and wants to be left alone. She is using it as a way to regulate herself. Such a different thing. This movement to turn it in, I don't know if you agree, it's turned into this punishment.
Yes.
You go sit there. Do you know that you can go to Toys R Us? Are you looking for a shower gift for anybody?
Because there a naughty chair?
Yes, you can, and it's actually bundled up as the perfect shower gift, and it gives you the instructions, 1 minute for a 1-year-old. Don't you think that's criminal?
It's really creepy.
So I have a bus that's going to leave this Friday night in the middle of the night. You want to get on it?
And so he's raiding
We're going to Toys R Us. We're going to totally mess up the gender stuff. And we're going to destroy the naughty chairs.
What are we going to do about the parents on airplanes?
Well, that's another story. Don't take 15-hour flights. I just want, I think time in is what is needed. Time in and appreciation. If I'm dysregulated and I'm not able to connect, that I need to do some breathing. I might need to go sit for a minute, wash my face, whatever I need. A child may also need to be able to go through that arc of feeling to come back to regulation. And if I'm uncomfortable sitting or being close, I own it. Don't put it on my child.
How old do you think kids can be taught the word regulation?
Young. I think, it's not a mysterious word. We talk about astronauts. We talk about
dinosaurs.
All these, what are they called? Power Rangers and all of those people. We can talk about you're dysregulated, you're having big feelings, you need to regulate. If we use it in the course of everyday language, I love that I have a grandson that says, I'm dysregulated, get me some ice. That's been liberation for him.
Yeah.
What age do you think? Would you agree?
I mean, I'm just thinking it could be quite young. Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
have a question?
Different world. Different world. Um, here's one. Janina, can you speak more about how to engage people who become triggered by empathy, by calm and warm tones of voice, friendly facial expressions? How do we stimulate the social engagement system? And how do we support someone in the development of new neural pathways so they can respond to empathy? And I think the key here is that, again, empathy is about my feeling empathized with, right? You can say something, one of the things that I've noticed as a very, very, very busy person is that people often say what are meant to be very empathic comments, like, I don't know how you do so much, or, you really deserve some rest. Those aren't empathic comments for me, right? I don't get a sense of empathy. What would be an empathic comment would be someone saying, you must really love and believe in what you do, okay? Then I could feel that. So, one of the problems is when we empathize, we're really often using our own feelings as a guide. We're not necessarily resonating to the mirror neurons of the other person. So if I'm with somebody who is triggered by warmth and soft tones of voice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get more of a tough tone to my voice. I'm going to throw in a few swear words. I'm going to say, oh, shit. Yeah, those fuckers. All right? Right? Because that may resonate for the person to whom I'm speaking as real empathy. Can you believe that shit? Right? Is probably, for some people, that's going to be more empathic than my saying, boy, you've had a really hard time, huh? Right? That can feel humiliating and condescending. Right? So I think it's really about how do we put ourselves in someone else's moccasins and really get what feels attuned and empathic to them. You stimulate the social engagement system by creating a sense of safety for somebody. And of course, that's hard because all of us in this room are here because we believe in safe and respectful communication and interactions. But what feels safe to someone else is different. So I help people feel safe by using my social engagement system like crazy and really trying to express more of what I'm saying through my body and my facial expression than through my words. Because after all, think about traumatic environments. Do you believe the words or do you believe the gut sense that you have about what somebody's really saying? You got another question?
I do.
Yeah? Oh, we are. Oh, right, because these clocks are off.
We're running late because this is not the real time.
We
Are
can
you
be in
dying
this
for one more
imaginary
question?
world.
Well, are you dying for lunch? What's the feeling in the room? Lunch? Question?
One more question.
Question? All right, one more question.
Well, you mentioned the challenges of working with DMH. Has there been any attempts for ECHO to collaborate with DMH? There are individuals throughout the system who are trying to incorporate these philosophies into our work, but it would be so great if it was more of a top-down approach. I really want to honor that question, and I want to honor the people who are within these systems, teachers, whether they're teachers, whether they're therapists, lawyers, people working within the dominant paradigm who are actually bringing in the voices of nonviolence and trauma-informed approaches. I think that we have to think about how to support each other. I think we have to think about how we actually form networks of support. I think there's definitely a network of support for people in LA who know about the Magnolia Community Initiative. That's a place where people come on regular basis to get support. I also think that Stephanie, come. Stephanie, I think our training that we do for therapists is another place to come and get support. So will you announce it? Stephanie, introduce yourself.
I'm Stephanie Blank, and Ruth and I are in our, how many times have we done it? 5, 7? I have a long time. We've been giving a training for mental health professionals, and so I'm shamelessly advertising for it now. It's an all-day training, and I actually used to work for a DMH contracted facility where we were doing all nonviolent engagement with clients and working with children in this paradigm, and it continues to. So there was some system change there, which is very exciting because I'm gone and it's still there. So anyway, we're going to spend a whole day. There's a flyer that looks like this at the registration desk, and you can sign up to spend a day with Ruth and I. We'll have the passion and the science there. Talking about, we'll spend a lot of time with the brain, a lot of time talking about trauma-informed care and how to bring nonviolence to clinical practice, because a lot of us were trained not in a nonviolent fashion, and so this is a bit of reworking for that, and then creating a network of support for one another, and yeah. So, anything else?
Can I just add one thing to what Ruth just said? In the state of Massachusetts, we were able to work within the DMH system to get a statewide trauma-informed care mandate, which means that every program that receives funds from the Department of Mental Health in the state of Massachusetts has to have trauma-informed care training. And Janice LaBelle, who is the person in Massachusetts who really made that happen, so she worked to bring it to the attention of higher and higher and higher authorities. That's what we need, that paradigm. And Janice, I've had people from all over the U.S. and all over the world email Janice. She is always happy to help people think about system change within DMH.
Thank you. I want to thank both Ruth and Janina for being so gracious and answering all the questions.